Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the penultimate round of the F1. Hold on. My OBS is not wanting to play around today. Welcome to the the penultimate round of F1 2024 in the Irish Esports Collegiate Winter Series powered by natives. A little apologies needed for the late delay there. Had some technical difficulties. I'm on my own tonight. I am Gib, of course, and we are going straight from uh, our starting screen soon into the pit lane here. So, going to be a fun one for you tonight. Qatar, so bit of an interesting track, very fast at points. And we are going to be getting right into it in a few minutes. So just waiting for whoever is going to jump in to their first outlap. Could be interesting to see what tactics people take this evening. Oh, apologies. I again on my own, so I'm casting, I'm streaming as well in the behind the scene behind the picture. So I'm going to be a little bit more flustered than I usually am, but definitely going to be an exciting night. It is round 7 out of 8, so going to be a lot of action coming up for you this evening. If we take a second to have a look at our standings just for the time being while people are warming up, we can see that Speeder is kind of in the clear at the moment. He's not really having to worry about fighting off somebody for taking that first place. Freedom is not racing tonight, so second place is kind of looking like it might be Ella's to take, all for the taking, and then going to be definitely a little bit of a scrappy battle towards, you know, the midfield area of this competition. But getting back into the game now for you. Apologies, we have people on their outlaps. So Nico, Obituary, Ella, Mini Kai are all going for their outlaps, getting a little bit of temperature into those tires. But we see Speeder is taking that little he's taking that. Apologies, I'm trying to bring this up for you. So they're all going out on softs. Speeder is sitting in the pit, as he likes to do. He likes to take that tactic, wait for everybody else to... Oh, sorry. Wait for everybody else to get their laps out of the way and really, you know, then come in for the kill on those lap times. So, going to be interesting to see. Here we see Ella is starting her first flying lap. Nico as well, coming down that main straight. Qatar, 16 corners. There is one DRS zone, and it is between turn 16 and turn 1. It's that long straight where we're going to see the most action tonight. It's you know, Qatar has a lot of fast corners, but it's one of the main overtaking areas. There is a couple other corners along the track that there is that potential for overtaking, but that's definitely where we're gonna be seeing a lot of the action this evening. Apologies, viewers. I'm used to taking breaks in between talking to let everybody else, or to let co-casters speak, but there's nobody there to receive me this evening. So here we see a good flying lap, a good Sector 3, Sector 1 and Sector 2, apologies, from Ella coming down into Sector 3 towards the final couple of turns. What kind of time is she going to be able to put out down the straight now into that only DRS zone on the circuit? A 122. So here we see Nico trying to best that. A 123. So a little bit of time to make up. We have seen Nico able to do that. Obituary coming down the main straight on their flying lap, their first flying lap, going to be getting themselves a... Oh, apologies. They haven't set a time yet. Interesting. So might have invalidated that time on themselves. And it looks like Minikai is doing the same. Speeder still sitting in the pits waiting for that moment until, you know, he feels that he needs to come out and really show everybody what he's made of. Or maybe potentially taking a page out of his book, his own book last time. The last race, if we remember, if we cast our minds back a week ago, he decided to purposely qualify in last place so that he had to fight his way up the grid throughout the course of that one. Definitely an interesting tactic, but proved fruitful for himself, winning that race. Not necessarily getting the fastest lap, though, if I remember correctly. Somebody else had stolen that from out under his nose. He's going for his out lap. He's getting a bit of temperature into those tires. Going to be, you know, definitely having a little bit of a warm-up lap on this out lap, and then going to go for his flying lap. So we'll keep the tires on the screen for you there so you can see them. He's going out on the softs. Now that's an interesting tactic, bearing in mind that the past couple races he's gone out on those inters to kind of lay a bit of rubber onto the track and get that time under his belt to, you know, definitely have a fallback when he doesn't get that fastest lap that he usually wants to get on the qualifying. Here we're sitting with Minikai 2 laps out. Still hasn't put a time on the board, it looks like. Let me bring that up for you. Oh, apologies, a 124. So definitely going to want to be thinking about putting down something a little bit faster than that if they're looking to get on themselves on the front row for this evening. We see that Ella and Nico have returned to the pits along with Obituary, who has yet to set a time. So definitely maybe thinking to wait till the last minute. They've got, you know, 11 minutes left to put down faster times, or in Obituary's case, to put down a time for this starting grid line. Sorry, I'm going to take a drink of water. Apologies, viewers. You probably heard me gulp, and it's, you know. Anyway, so here we are with Minikai still. Obituary is coming out of the pits. Let's take a look at Speeder, who is on his out lap. Minikai returning to the pits. Happy with that 124 for the time being, but possibly not forever. Speeder into the pits. Not setting a fastest lap time that he is pleased with, so potentially going for a pit stop, settling down for a little bit, and then going out again. Obituary getting a little bit of heat into those tires. Apologies, I forgot about the word heat. Getting a little bit of heat into those tires, trying to warm them up a bit more, get a bit more grip for his flying lap to try and set a time. Where can he place? Now, we only have 5 racers in this evening, so that's definitely going to have an effect on the points system this evening. Bearing in mind that, you know, everybody's within decent points gaining territory for this evening. So going to try and get a bit more warmth into those tires. Need to be a little bit careful there, Obituary, but definitely something to look out for. Obituary's flying lap. Ella is coming out of the pits for another out lap, trying to go for another run, set down a faster time potentially, but we will have to wait and see. We'll sit with Ella for a little bit. I want to, you know, talk about Ella. She has drastically improved over the season. There was a couple races that she didn't have the best starts. If we throw our minds all the way back to race 1 in Bahrain, and Ella didn't have a chance to qualify or get a qualifying time then because opened up the DRS on that DRS zone and flew straight into the wall. So has become more and more consistent as the season has gone on, has managed to secure herself a lot of those, you know, 4th, 5th place positions throughout the racing, and all credit to her, has managed to land herself in 3rd place. Now, with 77 points and Freedom on 77 points, and Freedom not being in the penultimate race, which is this one in Qatar, it's going to be potentially taking that position back from Freedom. Freedom managed to take P2 in the overall standings from Ella last race, but Ella looking like she will be able to re-secure that position in the overall standings going into the final round, which will be in Yas Marina, Abu Dhabi. So definitely one to look out for next week. But of course, we are going to be bringing you everything that this track has to offer. Minikai on another outlap. It's Obituary going for his flying lap. Good time coming into sector 3 there. Coming down the main straight towards that DRS zone. Going to be setting themselves a 125. Not bad for a lap to at least have something on the board, but definitely is probably thinking can push a little bit faster on this second go around. Minikai also on an outlap, or a flying lap, apologies, trying to get a better time in the qualifying, trying to secure potentially that front row spot from either Nico or Ella on the starting line. That being said, Ella with a 122.815, besting her own time and, you know, keeping herself in that P1 starting grid position out of qualifying. So going to be happy with that. Potentially might go for another run, but who am I to say? Speeder still sitting in the pits. Apologies. Still sitting in the pits. Had gone out for an outlap. Didn't put a time down. Came back into the pits and has been there ever since. So 6 minutes left on qualifying. Has to be thinking about putting a time down or potentially going for the same tactic he went for last week, which was to qualify last and battle his way up throughout the grid and up into first position, taking that win overall in the race. This is, let's talk a little bit about the track. So I'm not the most familiar with Qatar, but I know that if you go too wide, if you go way too wide on some of these turns, you'll end up in the sand, and you don't want to be doing that because it gets all up in your tires and really just could be a bad day. And there are a couple of turns along the track that just, they're a lot more narrow than you would expect them to be. So drivers are definitely going to have to be thinking about that going throughout this race. Nico coming into the pits as well. Let's change over to Minikai, who, oh, apologies, my controller has disconnected apparently. Minikai still going for those front line positions, but not being able to capitalize on it just yet. Going pretty fast through sector 2, however, and potentially looking to capitalize on the fact that has clean air all around them and not having to worry about other cars on the track. Everybody else in the pits for the time being. Can they improve on their time? Sector 3 coming down towards that final turn 16 where the DRS zone starts. But are they going to be able to do anything about it? Or they're going into the pits. So not happy with that run. Back into the pits for them. And Obituary is coming out of the pits at the perfect moment. So definitely something we can talk about and we can watch. Obituary has had this tenacity to him throughout the season. Just really, you know, in the first race had that awful spin on turn 1 in Bahrain. You know, went off the track, was quite a substantial amount of time behind, but still battled through to the very end. And that's what Obituary does so well, is even if they are, or even if he is out on the track a lap behind, still going till the bitter end, still trying to finish the race. And that is great sportsmanship, and all you can do is commend him for it. It's been great to watch, and definitely has something to be proud of himself, can give himself a pat on the back for that, because I know a lot of people wouldn't, you know, necessarily wait until, or fight their way with themselves in their mind till the bitter end. So definitely commend Obituary for doing that. Apologies, viewers. I'm going to take a drink of water because I'm getting, talking this much definitely dries the throat out. So while that is happening, Obituary coming down to the final turns, turn 16, down into that DRS zone, and going to be starting his flying lap. Amazing. Starting the flying lap. It looks like Speeder's put on the full wets tires for interesting tactic to take. Not having a time down on the board just yet, but potentially he's going for the full wet strategy. But yeah, definitely an interesting one. We see move off Obituary for a minute. We've been giving him a lot of the limelight this evening, and moving back over to Ella, who's going out for yet another flying lap to try and improve her time. Still sitting in P1 on the starting grid, but potentially wanting to extend that lead a little bit more in the qualifying session here. We see Minikai out for a flying lap, just crossing over the start-stop line there. Start-finish line, apologies. Coming into their flying lap. A 124, nothing to scoff at, but definitely wanting to improve their own time, get a better position off the starting grid. And here we see everybody's out for their out lap or on their flying lap. We see Speeder is out for his out lap, get a little bit of temperature into those full wets. Again, an interesting tactic to take, but definitely looking to put something on the board at this moment in time with a minute 30 seconds left in qualifying. So going to definitely be interesting to see how fast you can go on those wets in such a dry climate like Qatar is. And Ella improving her own time yet again, still sitting within the 122s, but knocking a couple of seconds off of her own time there. So yeah, doing pretty well, not having to worry about having somebody take that time from her just at the moment. We see Nico is 1.1 seconds behind in their qualifying time so far, going for another out lap to try and potentially get another lap under their belt. They're going to be able to cross over the line before qualifying ends, so they're going to have that lap to put down, but need to be careful they don't push themselves too hard going for this flying lap. Seems like everybody's out for their flying laps at the moment. Let's jump down to Speeder, our current standing champion, and will be the champion going forward, because in the standings, not much anybody can do to catch up to him now. So looking like it's just a couple of victory races for him. But on those wets, interesting tactic going out on them. But Speeder has taken some interesting tactics in the past race last week. So definitely wanting to maybe, as I say, is pretty in the clear for the championship title, but is possibly just having a bit of fun with what he can do, what he's capable of, showing us all in the process. A little bit squirrely coming into that turn, but managed to recover it. Didn't have too much of a drastic impact on him. He's carrying a lot of speed through a lot of these corners on those wets. So, a little bit slidey, but nothing he should worry about too much. Has it all under control. We see Obituary is there and securing himself that P4 position. Unless Speeder can do a little bit better than Obituary's current time, which was I will tell you now, a 125.3. No. So that looks like that's what the starting grid will be. Apologies, my controller is a little bit temperamental. That is our starting grid. It seems like it will be Ella in first, Nico in P2, Minikai P3 on the second row, with Obituary in P4 and Speeder in P5. And that will be the end of our qualifying session. Definitely an interesting one. A lot to talk about. But how will it affect the race moving forward? We know that Speeder has that push in him to really, push for that P1 position overall in the race. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And with no Freedom and no Chris this week round, it's going to be, well, not plain sailing for Speeder, but definitely those are the two racers that throughout this entire season have put Speeder under the most pressure. We saw that three-way battle between Freedom and Speeder and Chris for kind of P1, P2 last race that ended up fizzling out around the end of the race. But yeah, so Chris and Speeder and Freedom kind of all putting that pressure on each other, but could be an opportunity for the other racers to give Speeder a bit of a run for his money in this race. But before any of that, before the race kicks off, I'm going to take a moment of your time to thank our amazing sponsors that help make what we do here at Ireland Esports Collegiate Series a possibility. So a big thank you and shout out to Reroll, PlayAid, KOKA, GG Machines, Stacks, and Dogpatch Labs. They are our wonderful sponsors that help us keep the show rolling here on Ireland Esports Collegiate Series, powered by natives. So if you want to support any of them, go check them out. You can find all of the links you need where you need to find them. And we are just waiting to get into the race session, into the formation lap. Going to be an interesting one. Apologies for not cutting to cameras. My webcam is frozen, so apologies for that. You don't get to see my mug today, but going to be going into the formation lap here. Oh, apologies. No formation lap. Just straight into the race. It looks like. So, yeah, lap 1 of 29 laps to go. Ella is holding the pace at the moment, keeping in control of that. And looking like everybody's finding their little positions at the moment. Obituary has been demoted from P4 into P5 by Speeder, who has just taken another position from Minikai there. But it looks like Minikai's not gonna take that line down. Gonna be battling Speeder for that position of P3, but Speeder managing to open that gap up a little bit for the time being. Oh look, beautiful race strategies. Talking of race strategies, let's have a look. Everybody's gone for mediums, which we had seen last race as well, I'm pretty sure. We have seen, very different race strategies throughout the championship. We had seen the likes of Freedom, who is very hard on those tires, go for the hards at the start of the race so can push a little bit longer than compared to on those softs. But going to be Ella setting a 1.27 fastest lap of the race so far. How long can she keep that going is the question, though. There we see everybody's lap times, and we will bring this back here. So has a little bit of a gap over Speeder, about a second, but needs to be keeping that gap increasing that little bit more, as of course DRS will be enabled very, very soon, so has to worry about that. But everybody seems to be in a pretty good grouping for the time being. Apart from Obituary, who seems to have fallen behind by about 4 seconds. Let's just cut here. Did Obituary have a slide or a crash potentially? But unsure. We'll have to look back at the replay after the fact. Here we see, camera isn't changing. There we go. Here we see our race leader is getting caught a little bit. Speeder is definitely trying to close that gap between himself and Ella, and the gap between Speeder and Nico opening up that little bit more, but Nico is having to worry about Minikai closing down that gap and really chasing for the time being. really going to be wanting to put that push, close that gap. Speeder taking the fastest lap overall for the time being, a 125. Ella managed to have it there. And as saying that, Speeder has taken P1 from Ella. Ella is going to want to be keeping close as possible to stop him from getting out of the DRS zone and try and, play her cards right and really challenge him for that position a bit further down the track potentially. Let's jump across to this bit of a battle happening between Nico and Minikai now that the group has dispersed that little bit more. 2 seconds between Nico and Ella, so definitely having to worry about Minikai for the time being and not so much on Ella. Little bit of a squirrely mistake there. Here we see, big lockup on the brakes. They're both pushing. Nico is pushing for that position and definitely having their work cut out for them. So here we go. Is Minikai going to be able to take the opportunity coming down in this sector? Little bit of a straight here. Going to have to think about that turn coming up. And are they playing their cards right? Are they going to make a move down the straight in that DRS zone within that danger of DRS on Nico? Going to go side by side, take the position from Nico. Nico is going to take it back through turn 1, but very close to having a big contact there. So definitely one to watch out for. Obituary has fallen behind, but as we know and love Obituary, he is going to battle it out to the very end. And while I was talking about Obituary, Ella has taken P1 back from Speeder. So definitely a battle to keep an eye out on. Speeder not going to take that lightly. Going to be pushing for that position. Going to be taking every ample opportunity to re-secure P1 from Ella. But Ella's not going to take it lying down. Going to be fighting off Speeder, coming through these corners. A lot of pace on the two of them. A bit of a lockup. Very heavy braking on that turn. Ella's going to be feeling the pressure now, holding off Speeder in that P1 position. Definitely one to watch out for the time being. As we see that Nico and Minikai, the gap is increasing and decreasing. It's keeping very steady. Although Minikai is dropping back down a little bit. So definitely we'll have a look at that a little bit later. But coming down the main straight in that DRS zone. And is Speeder going to take avail of that DRS to make a move on Ella? He's going for it. He's going to take that position. Is Ella going to be able to re-secure it from Speeder? Not quite having the space or the time to do that, but still very dangerous for Speeder. Speeder's definitely going to have to think about dealing with that in the coming lap or two, unless he can extend that lead a little bit more, increase that gap from Ella being out of that danger zone of the DRS. And here we see Speeder is managing to open that gap up just that little bit more that he needs. Try and get that time he needs to kind of leave Ella in the dust almost and really just take the track one corner at a time. Almost a second between them now. Speeder's going to be wanting to push to open that gap up just that little more to make sure that Ella's no longer within DRS zone, time zone at least. And there it is, out of the DRS danger, but not for long. Ella has managed to bring that gap down a little bit more and potentially going to make up a little bit of ground here. If we move over to Nico and Minikai coming down that main straight, Minikai hot on Nico's tails, not giving up just yet. Gonna potentially close that gap up a little bit, but not enough down that main straight. 0.3 a second separates them now, so getting closer and closer every lap. Potentially, if Minikai can keep within that kind of 0.3, 0.4 of a second of Nico, can potentially go for an attack on the next lap or on the next DRS main straight lap. So potentially something Mini Kai might be thinking about. We are 6 laps in, so tires are definitely going to be becoming a factor pretty soon around that kind of lap 11, lap 12, lap 13 mark on those mediums. We've seen a lot of pushing from some of these drivers, so going to be having a bit of an impact on those tires. Yeah, so here we see Nico is conserving a lot of that battery, whereas Mini Kai has been using a lot of that battery to try and close that gap between themselves and Nico. Now 1.1 seconds behind, so definitely should be possibly taking that opportunity to recharge the battery while still pushing, but recharge the battery nonetheless. Nico not having to worry as much with the danger kind of gone for the time being, out of that DRS danger strike zone, but still having to think about and concentrate on their own driving. That is where a lot of these mistakes come from. That pressure being put on them, on a driver, having that somebody else breathing down that neck, down their neck, that soft pressure, that soft power, as commentator Morky Mork loves to talk about. And really, that is what can throw a driver off and make a colossal mistake. But everybody looks and seems to be driving pretty smoothly, taking their time, getting into that rhythm, getting into that pace of this track. And it is definitely a track that, without a practice session, takes a bit of time to kind of get into that headspace of keeping that rhythm of the track. A little bit of a gap now between Speeder and Ella. 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds between them. So Speeder has definitely grown that gap, but still time and still have to think about pit stop strategy. Could potentially go from the mediums to the hards for this race, make it a 1 pit stop race for themselves. Apologies, had to take a drink of water. Mini Kai, if we look towards the kind of middle of the pack at the moment, Mini Kai, that gap between themselves and Nico has opened up that little bit more. No longer within the DRS danger zone. If we cut over to them, oh, apologies. I have to hold my controller at a weird angle. So Nico has 70% battery left and Mini Kai has 40%. So Mini Kai definitely on the push to get a little bit closer to Nico, but potentially needs to conserve that battery so that when they go for that attack within that DRS range, potentially on that main straight into turn 1, which is always a great place for an overtake, but definitely having to think about think about their battery reserves. If they make that attack and then don't have the reserves to keep that going, they could lose the position once again. But definitely things are starting to spread out throughout the grid. We have Speeder in P1 currently. Behind him in P2, Ella 3.8 seconds behind Ella. Nico 4.9 seconds behind, 5 seconds behind. Mini Kai in P4, 1.5 seconds behind, and Obituary in P5, 21.1 seconds behind. So Obituary doing what Obituary does best, even though 21 seconds behind the rest of the group, still trying to battle through these laps to get that car across the line, and that's all that matters for Obituary at the moment. Just crossing the line, getting into that flow, really sticking it to the track, keeping the car on the track, and getting those sweet points for P5 potentially. But because not having to battle with anybody else, not having to wear down your tires, could potentially be thinking about having a go at that fastest lap if they were so inclined to take that extra point from everybody else on the board. But also, not having to battle anybody means you're not wearing down your tires, not having to expend your battery. You can definitely get a couple extra laps out of your tires if you're careful enough. So definitely something to think about in the pit strategy as we move back to Minikai and Nico. Minikai back within that DRS range, so could potentially be making a move this lap or the next, lap 10. So 19 laps left to go after this one. Could be on for a move here. A little bit of a stutter from my game there. Apologies. And here is Nico managing to open that gap up a little bit more between themselves and Minikai, keeping the danger at bay for the time being, but that could all change with just one small mistake. If we move back up towards Speeder in the clear for the time being, can kind of really just think about getting around the track cleanly, not incurring any time penalties, because the time penalty could be the difference between P1 and P2 for Speeder if he incurs too many at this moment in time, but can kind of comfortably sit in that rhythm he's got. He's carrying a lot of speed through some of these corners and really just holding on to that position. Not too worried about Ella at the moment and just concentrate on his driving. And the same could be said for Ella. 6 seconds behind Speeder, but 5.6 seconds ahead of Nico. Can get into that flow, into that rhythm of this track. Coming down the main straight, looking very tidy around turn 16. Can really just focus on her driving and not worry about things too much. That being said, Nico doesn't have the same opportunity to really think about, getting into that rhythm. Has to be much more concerned about getting into that rhythm of keeping those consistent lap times going, as Minikai still has the ability to really push and go for that position and make an attack on Nico, taking P3 from them. So definitely having that in the back of their mind, but nothing too concerned for the time being, at least. But yeah, it's definitely a case of Speeder and Ella can kind of breathe deeply, take a deep breath, and really just focus on the driving. But Nico has to be that much more precise. If Nico were to make a mistake, it could cost them P3 here, with Minikai being so close behind. But whereas Speeder and Ella have a little bit of cushion time to recover from a potential mistake. That being said, Ella getting a 3-second penalty for track infringements. If we go over here, so yeah, that's again, like I was saying, is 6 seconds ahead of Nico, so doesn't really have to worry that much, but definitely having to think about extending that lead that little bit more, because that 6 seconds is really now just shrunk down to 3 seconds ahead. So having to think about that. Minikai has gone into the pits, potentially coming out on those hards. Oh, that is definitely potentially going for that one-stop pit stop in this race, not having to worry about going on to a different compound later in the race. 12 laps in, so yeah, about that 11, 12, 13 lap mark for those mediums, it's looking like, from Minikai. And going out on those hards now means that they can potentially make up that difference when everybody else goes in for their pit stop. Ella a little bit hard on the braking there, but not too hassled. We move back over to Speeder, who's comfortably sitting with now a 10-second gap between himself and Ella. Doesn't have to worry anymore about Ella potentially catching up to him if he were to make a mistake with that 3-second penalty. He is having the time of his life. He's having the time of his life, and really just reveling in the fact that he is currently on top of this championship and will secure himself another, potentially, if he has the fastest lap, potentially will bring himself home another 26 points on top of his already 140 something points. So definitely nobody can catch him now. But definitely, a little bit squirrely coming out of that turn, but managed to recover it just that little bit. The time intervals now. Let's have a quick chat about where everybody is sitting. So, of course, Speeder at the front of the pack, as we have known to see from him. Potentially thinking about going into the pits pretty soon. He's got 12 laps on those mediums, so has to start thinking about his tire wear, his pit strategy. But nothing too uncomfortable for him at this moment in time. Ella in P2. Again, 12 laps on those mediums, thinking about pit strategy, thinking about coming into the pits potentially very soon. But 3-second time penalty having to worry about, so is possibly thinking about... Oh, and there we see Speeder into the pits. But Ella is possibly thinking about, have to extend that gap over Nico a little bit more before I go into the pits with that 3-second penalty under her belt. Nico in P3. Again, 12 laps on those mediums going into the pits. So was 8 seconds behind Ella, but now is going into the pits, potentially going for those hards. Looks like those hards are going on. Minikai, 25 seconds behind, but that's all going to change now because Nico is in the pits. An obituary with Minikai going into the pits a little bit earlier than the rest of them is able to sit not as far back, but still a 10-second gap between himself and Minikai. Now, Minikai has timed that pit stop really well, coming out right beside Nico in the pit, coming out of that pit lane. 0.3 seconds between them now, and not much of a danger gap between Nico and Speeder. Ella is in P1, but thinking about having to come into the pits for a tire change. Obituary looked like picked up a time penalty as well, but has returned to the pits. So could be potentially... Oh yeah, there we see Obituary has that time penalty, so has another added kind of potentially 3 seconds. I think it was track infringement, so another 3 seconds added onto his already 36-second behind gap between himself and Minikai. Here we're sitting with Speeder, who's opted to go for the softs. An interesting tactic with, we're only 15 laps into this race, so potentially trying to secure that fastest lap point for himself, stop anybody else from stealing it from under his nose like they did last week. And it seems like everybody's going for that one-stop pit stop strategy. Everybody, apart from Speeder, has gone onto those hards. So could it prove fruitful if we switch over onto Nico and Minikai? Minikai really giving Nico a run for their money, trying to keep that gap down in the 0.2, 0.3 danger area. Potentially has the opportunity to make a move while coming down the main straight in that DRS zone. Down into that turn, and here we come. Is Minikai going to be able to have the gusto to make a move on Nico, have that battery reserve to keep Nico off their heels for that little bit longer, coming down into turn, into this kind of S-curve area of the track? But Nico managing to pull away a little bit, but still Minikai trying to keep within that DRS zone. And there it is. Speeder went onto those softs to put that fastest lap time down, a 1:23.9. So trying to very much keep that fastest lap point for himself. It is his and it's nobody else's. And now the gap between himself and Ella is 17 seconds as we're on the main straight here with Minikai and Nico. Minikai going to make a move. Nico not quite able to take it back, but round turn one is side by side, going for the move, goes wide, not able to recover from it, and taking P3 back from Minikai, but Minikai still holding on for that, going on the inside of turn. Oh, wow. Nico managing to inch out that much. Little bit much more than Minikai, but Minikai still within that danger zone for Nico. Nico having to worry about Minikai making another move, potentially if they have the battery reserve. A little bit wide on that turn though. Going to cost them a couple of milliseconds, and Nico able to pull ahead that little bit more, half a second between them. It's the only exciting battle that's happening on the track at the moment in time, with that gap between everybody else just so massive that nothing can really come of it. But definitely exciting battle between Minikai and Nico, with Minikai making that move but not quite able to hold onto that position from taking that position from Nico. Nico still in P3 for the time being. Half a second between them now, opening that gap up a little bit. Minikai shaving off those couple of milliseconds to try and keep within that. But saying that, has managed to gain themselves a 3-second time penalty from race control for track infringements. We saw that happen a couple of times there. Minikai going to be making the move down on Nico, down the main straight. Going to take the position from him, but they're going side by side into turn 1, into turn 2, around turn 3. Going to be keeping that position from Minikai, or from Nico, apologies. And going to try and extend that gap, but now having to worry about that 3-second time penalty. Even if they can keep this position, they're going to have to open that gap up quite substantially to keep out of reach, keep in that P3 for the end of the standings in this race. But Nico not giving up just yet. A little bit wide on that turn, but still pushing on Minikai, really showing Minikai where Nico stands within this championship. A little bit of corner cutting on that last turn, but no penalties dealt for it at this moment in time. This is getting intense between these two. Oh, apologies. This is getting intense between these two. That gap has not extended or decreased that much between those couple of turns. So potentially Nico going to be making a move down the main straight, just like Minikai did to them. And here we go down through turn 16 into that DRS zone. Going to potentially go for that move, but could be playing their cards right. Could be reserving that battery to potentially make another move. Oh, Nico is moving out towards the outside of the track. Going to be taking that position from Minikai. Minikai not really responding all too much. Still trying to hold on to that position, but not as good a defense. They made a move out to the wide, but Nico managed to move back onto the inside for that turn 1 and take that position from Minikai. Minikai not going to take that lying down, but let's cut over to somebody else we haven't seen from in a while. Ella is 20 seconds behind Speeder. 23 if you include that time penalty she has incurred throughout this race. Apologies. Almost at the 10 laps ago point, is found their rhythm, throughout this race. Hasn't really had to battle too much for positions. Didn't have to battle Speeder for the P2 position, but from Speeder at least. Well, Speeder didn't have to battle Ella for it, as Ella went into the pits and changed over to the hard tires, is what I was trying to say. But yeah, has that clean air, doesn't have to worry about anybody behind them for the moment in time. 9 seconds between herself and Nico, so not too fussed about that. But overall, it's about a 6-second gap, saying that Minikai has taken that position from Nico. Let's change over there, see what this battle is happening over here. They're going side by side into a lot of these turns. Minikai able to inch out that little bit forward. Nico going for the move on that turn on the inside, taking the position from Minikai. But is Minikai able to take it back side by side? This is very close through this turn, and coming down into this bit of a fast turn here, but slowing down that little bit to stop themselves going wide. This battle is heating up. It's a battle for P3 at the moment in time. It's all up for grabs here. Nico is... Let's have a look at those battery reserves, shall we? So Here we see Nico has been able to conserve quite a bit of their battery, not expending too much of it, whereas Minikai has been using a lot of that battery compared to Nico. So even if Minikai were to make a move, still having to worry about Nico's battery levels. 79 versus 24 now, going to be making for that position, but if they're able to hold on is another question with that low battery reserve. Here we see Minikai trying to go on the outside of Nico there, going to go for the inside of this turn, but not able to edge out that little bit more than Nico on those turns. So Nico going to comfortably sit half a second above Minikai for the time being, and not too fussed about that. Can kind of breathe a little bit more knowing that Minikai isn't really within the danger zone of making another attack for at least about another half of a lap. Nico going to incur a time penalty for themselves though, so that will cancel each other out pretty much, of Nico and Minikai's time penalties for track infringements. So not having to worry about that as much anymore is going to take a little bit of that weight off of Minikai's shoulders, who of course had that 3-second time penalty on their own, but Nico's 3-second time penalty will cancel theirs out in the standings at the end of the race. So doesn't have to worry about it too much, can kind of put that push on Nico now, try and gain back that position and hold it for a little bit longer than they have been doing throughout this race. They've been taking that position from Nico, getting up to P3, but been expending a lot of that battery, not being able to defend it off coming into turn 2 and 3 throughout this race. Apologies, I'm going to take a drink of water. You can probably hear my throat is getting a little bit hoarse, so I can continue talking about this fantastic battle happening before our very eyes. Now, excuse me. We see Nico has managed to extend their lead over Minikai by about a second now, so going to be able to relax a little bit more. If we move over to Minikai here, has been on the back a little bit now, pulled off of that gas pedal push a little bit, and kind of potentially reserving a little bit more of that battery for that main straight. If they can at least just keep within the DRS zone, can potentially use that to their advantage. We see Speeder is in the pits, and Ella is going to take P1 from Speeder for the time being. But the question is, with 2 seconds between them, how long can Ella hold off Speeder? Now, having to worry about that 3-second time penalty. Again, Speeder the only one without a time penalty currently. That can all change, but we are on lap 22. We are counting down 7 laps to go. Ella is on 7 laps of those hards, so not too in the danger zone of tire wear just yet, but Speeder is on softs once again. He's got that kind of tire compound advantage, can go a little bit faster than Ella can on those softs, but will wear them down a lot quicker if he's not careful. But definitely one to watch out for. Even if Ella was to take P1 at the end of this race, Speeder will be taking it from her in the overall standings because of that 3-second time penalty. So Ella is going to be wanting to push that little bit more, extend that lead from Speeder, but Speeder now in that DRS danger zone, can go for the overtake on that main straight now, coming down towards turn 16. Here we go. Speeder within range to make that move. Is he going to go out wide for it? No, he's not. He's going to stay behind Ella and potentially go around her in these oncoming turns. Turn 2 into turn 3 and 4. Sticking behind Ella a little bit, potentially waiting for the opportune moment to strike on Ella. Now, Ella's going to be feeling the pressure coming onto in her mind of Speeder. Speeder's going to make the move on the inside there and take P1 from Ella, and she is not going to be happy about that, but what can she do to take that position back from Speeder? The gap is opening up quite substantially at a rapid pace. Speeder is off in the distance, 0.6 seconds between them already, only after just taking that position about 2 turns ago. So not much Ella is doing in the case of a reply for the time being, but as long as she can stay within that DRS zone of Speeder, can potentially close that gap after they come down through turn 16. And Ella, another time penalty, was pushing the car a little too hard. 6 seconds of time penalties now potentially could be the time to change strategies. Just bring the car home in the current pace that she's going, not making those mistakes, not incurring any more time penalties, and keeping that gap between herself and Nico. Minikai with another time penalty. 6 seconds to Minikai's name as well in time penalties for track infringements. Going to be putting a damper on their race, especially now that they are 1.7 seconds behind Minikai in this battle. So that battle has kind of fizzled out a little bit, and Minikai has fallen back. Obituary with a 3-second time penalty. 6 seconds to his name. He's already 56 seconds behind the rest of the pack, and has now got an additional 6 seconds of time penalties to his name. Speeder still the only one without a time penalty. Is he going to incur one, or is he in the clear for the time being? Here we sit with Obituary, who's kind of gotten into that flow of things, going into the pits again. This is potentially the 3rd pit stop from Obituary. Is Obituary going for those softs, potentially trying to steal that fastest lap from Speeder? Could be a smart move now. Going on those softs for sure. The last 4 laps of the race, we move back over to Speeder, who is sitting comfortably 3 laps on those softs, 3 seconds between himself and Ella, and an additional 6 seconds of time penalties. So in the clear, can just enjoy himself sitting at the top of the overall standings in this championship, not having to worry about fighting anybody off for that P1 in the overall standings. Can enjoy the rest of these 4 laps to just take a breather, bring it home, smooth sailing from here. Ella 3 seconds behind, an additional 6 seconds of time penalties. Going to be wanting to do the same, just bring the car home, get back into that rhythm without, breaking those white lines too much, and just bring the car home. Keep that 14 seconds of distance between herself and Nico. Nico also has 3 seconds of time penalties, so having to not worry too much about that, actually. If we move our eyes back over to Minikai, who is 2 seconds behind with 6 seconds of time penalties. So the 3 seconds from Nico and the 3 seconds from Minikai will cancel each other out, but Minikai still having an additional 3 seconds of time penalties on their plate to worry about. So not much of a danger to Nico's position of P3. And of course, Obituary, 6 seconds of time penalties, 58 seconds behind everybody else for the time being. That will bring them to a minute and 14 seconds. Apologies, my maths is terrible. And my throat is getting a little bit sore from talking so much, but we press on just like Obituary presses on throughout this race, even whilst being at the back of the pack. Over back to, who should we watch? Who is piquing our interest for lap 26? Nico has gotten into that comfortable rhythm, it seems, not making any mistakes thus far, trying to just keep that pace going and holding on to P3. because if they were to incur another 3-second time penalty, it could spell disaster for them. Although 2 seconds between themselves and Minikai with 2 laps to go. Apologies. Minikai, another 3-second time penalty! Oh no, Minikai! That is 9 seconds of time penalties that they are having to worry about now. That is unfortunate. Another 3-second time penalty. 12 seconds of time penalties for Minikai. Not looking good. Has just been crossing over those white lines a little bit too much, overdriving the car potentially, trying to close that gap between themselves and Nico, but it's only resulted in a worse off situation for Minikai. Potentially needs to clean up those racing lines just that little bit more, stop cutting those corners, and bring the car home on those hards. But definitely going to be thinking about that one later this evening. And let's move over onto Speeder. Let's talk a little bit about Speeder for a moment. He has been a dominant force throughout this entire championship. He has won, this will be his sixth win of this season. He lost Bahrain to Freedom, if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, has 6 out of the 7 total race wins under his belt. A dominant performance throughout this season, and can happily sit at the top of the standings as our winter series champion, and can sit pretty comfortably knowing that that is the case. Minikai with a 10-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. 22 seconds of time penalties now to their name. Oh no, it's all falling apart for Minikai. This is so unfortunate for them, and you've got to feel a little bit bad for Minikai with those time penalties under their belt. It's going to be hard for them throughout the rest of this race, but only this lap and the next to go. Has opted to change. Oh, apologies. Minikai has opted to change out for those softs, potentially trying to steal that fastest lap time from out under Speeder's nose, get an extra point on the boards for themselves in the overall standings after tonight's race, especially with those 22 seconds. Going to be worrying about that. Bituary now 1 minute and 30 seconds behind, so about a lap behind now, and then some with that time penalty as well. But here we come through on, let's move on to Speeder for this final lap. He's coming through these turns, nicely done, carrying a lot of speed, doesn't have to worry about driving behind anybody else with that hot air, doesn't have to worry about battling anybody off for that position, can just bring it home comfortably now as he makes his way towards he's entering sector 2 now. He got a 0.6 seconds off on top of or compared to his last sector 1 time, so definitely not his fastest at the moment, but 7 laps under those soft tires, so gonna be feeling a little bit of wear for the time being. But yeah, he's had a brilliant dominating force. He's been a brilliant dominating force, I should say, for the entirety of this season. He had those battles with Freedom, with Chris as well. We saw that in the Belgian Grand Prix in Spa-Francorchamps. He had that battle, that tussle with Chris, a little bit of contact, but not much to worry him. And Speeder is going to take a 6th win throughout this season in the penultimate race of the Ireland Esports Collegiate Winter Series, powered by natives. Ella is also going to cross the line in P2. It looks like Nico will cross in P3, not having to worry about that time penalty anymore because of Minikai's unfortunate 22 seconds of time penalties. But as we see the final two making their way. Minikai, at least, is making their way down towards turn 16, towards that main straight and towards the finish line. Obituary has conceded in P5, and here we see Minikai finishing their race out in P4. So congratulations to all of our racers today. They've done an excellent job, all finishing the race, of course, which we love to see. And of course, we will always like to congratulate our winner. That is Speeder, of course. Oh, my camera is... Ooh, excuse me. Sorry. Apologies. My camera doesn't seem to be working today. I thought I'd fix that throughout the stream, but I guess not. But thank you so much for watching, and of course we will be back next week with the final round of the F1 Irish Collegiate Winter Series F1 powered by natives, and that will be in Yas Marina, Abu Dhabi for the final round, and it will be kind of a battle for P3, I think. Definitely will be the case. But of course, be sure to check out all of the other great streams that Irish Esports Collegiate has to offer. On Mondays, starting on Monday, we have a range of games being streamed over here and on the Natives GG Twitch channel as well. So be sure to check some of those streams out and follow us on our social media. But for now, I will say goodbye, and we will see you next week in